Greetings, Doom fans, and welcome to another edition of A Weather Gone Wild here on the Doomstead Diner. I was planning on getting my earthquake rant up as the next edition of Weather Gone Wild, since it has in it some controversial material on the underlying drivers for all the wacky weather we have been experiencing over the last couple of years. But Mother Nature has stepped in once again to play havoc with my broadcasting schedule. SuperSnowStorm Jonas is rolling over the mid-Atlantic here on Friday night as I begin keyboarding out this rant. Up to now, in late January, the east coast of the FSoA has had a remarkably mild winter, with some 70-degree Fahrenheit days around Christmas time, as I recall. Up here, on the last great frontier of Alaska, we have so far only had one minor snow event of about 3 inches, and currently the roads and even the bush are barren of snow at my elevation. Once again this year, it looks as though they're going to have to start the last great race on Earth, the Iditarod, in Fairbanks, rather than its traditional start point a few miles from where I live in the Matanuska-Susitna River Valley. For those of you unfamiliar with the Iditarod, it's a 1,000-mile dog sled race that finishes in Nome, Alaska. The race honors the heroic journey of mushers back in 1925 to deliver medicine to the children of Nome. From History.com. The children of Nome were dying in January of 1925. Infected with diphtheria, they wheezed and gasped for air, and every day brought a new case of the lethal respiratory disease. Nome's lone physician, Dr. Curtis Welch, feared an epidemic that could put the entire village, 1,400 people, at risk. He ordered a quarantine, but knew that only an antitoxin serum could ward off the fast-spreading disease. In 1925, they did not yet have the network of bush pilots that fly to the remote villages in Alaska, and to this day there is no real road system that goes much beyond the corridor that takes you from Seward up through Anchorage in the Matt Valley, then on to Fairbanks, connecting up with the only land road out of Alaska, the Alcan. The only way to get that serum to Nome in the dead of winter in 1925 was by dog sled. Some more from History.com. In 1925, a daring sled dog relay through the savage Alaskan winter delivered life-saving medicine to the remote village of Nome, an event commemorated each March by the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race. Although the furious dash involved 20 drivers and more than 150 dogs, the Great Race of Mercy made a superstar out of one particular canine, Balto. With the changes of weather patterns of the last 2 years, if they had had that weather back then, there would have been no hope for those children in Nome. Sleds don't work too good over bare ground, and wheels don't work too good if you don't have level roads. So in one of the great paradoxes here as climate changes, in some places too little snow is a problem, while in others too much snow is a problem. That's the problem we are looking at today, with the fascist states of America capital of Washington, D.C., directly in the crosshairs of SuperSnowStorm Jonas. I wish they had named it Stephen. The alliteration would have been much better. Before we get to the current events of Jonas, though, it's worthwhile to do a little recap of the history of snowstorms, since we certainly had them before the climate started to change so radically. It's not that all these weather events didn't happen before. There have always been floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, and snowstorms. The issues now are of frequency, duration, and intensity of all these events, and all those parameters appear to be on the increase. They also have more deleterious effects now because of the size and concentration of people into the big cities, and the dependence those places have on the infrastructure of roads and strung electric cable, etc. Taken in synergy, these two issues make mega snow events a much bigger problem today than they were a century or two ago, although by no means were big snow events ever an easy thing to negotiate for Homo saps. Since I grew up in New York City, every time we got a decent-sized snowfall, the weathermen of the time, this was before they professionalized their title to meteorologist, brought up the blizzard of '88. That would be 1888, not 1988, because a 1988 had not yet arrived. So nobody was confused about the date back then by dropping off the first 2 digits in naming the event. From Wiki on the blizzard of '88. The Great Blizzard of 1888, or Great Blizzard of '88, March 11th through March 14th of 1888, was one of the most severe recorded blizzards in the history of the United States of America. Snowfalls of 20 to 60 inches, 51 to 152 centimeters, fell in parts of New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, and sustained winds of more than 45 miles per hour, 72 kilometers an hour, produced snowdrifts in the excess of 50 feet, 15 meters. Railroads were shut down, and people were confined to their houses for up to a week. That is a shitload of snow, and maybe even more than SuperSnowStorm Jonas is due to drop down here on this go-round, although latest estimates are jacking it up now some. Back in 1888, they also did not have diesel-powered heavy equipment like snowplows and front-end loaders to get rid of the snow to clear the roads even for horses, which by themselves can negotiate fairly deep snow, but not when pulling a wagon. So lots of folks got trapped in their homes, and lots of them froze to death too in the blizzard of '88 of New York City. The big snowstorm I remember from my youth in New York was the Lindsay snowstorm in 1969, when John V. Lindsay was the less than beloved mayor of the metropolis, at least by the sanitation workers. They also upgraded their title like the weathermen did. Lindsay was having issues with the trash collectors union at the time, and these were the same guys who would clear the roads, using the garbage trucks with snowplows attached to push the snow off the roads. They didn't have much in the way of dedicated snow removal equipment back then, but the garbage trucks were big and heavy, and with chains attached to the tires, did a decent job of snow removal if the trucks got out on the road quick enough and kept up with the accumulation before getting themselves bogged down. Unfortunately for the honorable mayor, the garbage men, sanitation workers, were not terribly motivated to be out there 24/7 doing the job when they were negotiating their less than adequate wages of the time. So the snow piled up, and out in the borough of Queens where I lived at the time, it did not get cleared for over a week. Schools were shut down the whole week, and the sledding down the hill that my house sat on top of was the greatest ever. I was 12 years old, and it was the best winter vacation of my life. I was out sledding from daybreak to nightfall for a week straight. The snowball fights were epic, and so were the snow forts we built. So, big snow events do provide benefits to some people, sometimes. Mainly kids, though, not encumbered with lots of responsibilities, rather than their parents who need to be able to get to work to get a paycheck. For the working man, snow is just a big pain in the ass. Besides not being able to get to work is all that shoveling you have to do to clear the driveway. Not to mention getting plowed in if you are parked on the street. Not to mention all the fender-bender accidents with idiots who don't know how to drive in snow. And not to mention the deadly accidents with the even dumber drivers. During my years driving the big rig over the road, there was nothing I detested more than snow. Not just the storms either. Just regular events could be ultra nasty. On one particular occasion, I was driving to drop off a delivery in Minneapolis, St. Paul, coming up from the underground warehouses in Kansas City that were built from limestone mines used to create the Eisenhower Interstate Ring Road surrounding that town. My plan was to drive in around 3 a.m. to avoid traffic and wait at the receiver until they opened at 8 a.m. and snooze in the bunk. I gave myself plenty of time to get there because I didn't want to ruin my perfect record of never having been late on a delivery. There had been a mild snowfall during the day, dropping a few inches, and then it warmed up and turned to a light drizzle. It did not seem to be an issue while at the all-you-can-eat buffet in the truck stop the evening before. After stuffing myself on fat-drenched food from the buffet steamer, I went to nap in the bunk before the drive to Minneapolis. I woke up around 2 a.m. to get rolling, and I had no more than about 60 miles left to the receiver as I recall. It did not seem to be an issue as I rolled the 18 wheels down the on-ramp to the I-35. I was no more than 10 miles into the drive when I started noticing cars and trucks in the ditch off the road to both the left and the right. I slowed down to rubberneck the carnage. Then I felt my steering wheel go limp. Then I looked in my side mirror and all I saw was my trailer. No road behind me. It was cocked nearly 90 degrees to the tractor, and all 53 feet of it was spanning all 3 lanes of the interstate. If there had been any four-wheelers or other trucks within 100 feet of me at the time, the crash would have been epic. Fortunately for me and other potential victims, the finger of God stepped in again, along with good experience by that time handling a big rig. I went into a white-knuckle mode, pumped the brakes, turned in and out of the skid as the tractor started to lose traction, and Then, for probably what was only 2 to 3 minutes, but seemed like an eternity, I got it slowed down to maybe 5 miles per hour, and the trailer got back to where it belonged, directly behind me. What had occurred was that the early snow of the day had melted, and the water flowed down into a basin, which this stretch of interstate was built on. Then the drizzle started to freeze as it got cold overnight, and what resulted was about a 20-mile-long stretch of black ice. It was a skating rink. At this point, you might think I would try to pull off the road to the shoulder and stop, but I was afraid to do that. First off, there was enough slope sideways on the road that I thought that if I tried that, I would just continue to slide to the right and end up in the ditch with all the other hapless motorists I had passed by. Second, I figured if I stopped, I would not be able to get enough rolling traction to start moving again. So, for 4 hours, I drove white knuckles at 5 miles per hour down 20 miles of ice-covered interstate. I was the only one on the road still moving. I made my delivery with about 10 minutes left to spare. So, even just a small amount of snow and ice in the right conditions can screw up just about everything. Really big snow and ice events can raise this by an order of magnitude. Last year, it was Beantown that got hit, not once, but by a succession of snowstorms that by the time they were finished had dropped maybe 6 feet of snow down in less than a month. The dig-out took another month, but fortunately, there was not a lot of power outage in those storms that lasted that long. So the Bostonians mostly lived through last winter eating baked beans, and they're still parking the cars in Harvard Yard. SuperSnowStorm Jonas looks to be in another category so far, because its scope is so large, basically covering all the mid-Atlantic states where the largest population in the fascist states of America lives. Fully 1/4 of the population is jam-packed like sardines into this area of the country. Beyond that, the storm is packing some incredible winds with it, a 6 sigma wind event in a few places. By themselves, such winds can often do damage to trees and power lines, but when you combine such winds with snow and ice fall, the power lines are just complete toast. As I write this rant tonight, already more than 100,000 people in North and South Carolina are already without power. This is before the big event really gets rolling, though, in the D.C. area on Saturday. How much of the grid goes down here remains an open question as of now, but I suspect power will be out through the area well into next week. How well this can be handled by the government and by the population at large is yet another open question. The damage here will be epic as well, and once again another disaster area will be declared by the outgoing POTUS Obama-sama, freeing up these areas to be rebuilt with FEMA loans. All these townships and municipalities, up to their eyeballs in debt already, will need to take out still more loans to rebuild and restring their electrics. How many more cycles of this can they go through? I suspect it's not too many more. I'll follow up this rant with the aftermath of SuperSnowStorm Jonas sometime next week as the level of carnage becomes more clear. Jonas is another one of those great collapse events, which looks to be a gift that keeps on giving. And that's all the doom. This time until next time, here on Weather Gone Wild on the Doomstead Diner. And don't forget to drop by the Sustaining Universal Needs Foundation website at sunforliving.com and join with us in building a better tomorrow. Or at least drop on a donation. It's tax deductible. Later, diners.